Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing and analysing tech news, which as usual has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. I hope you're all having an amazing day. We have an awful lot of news to get through in this particular video, but I'd like to start things out with a quote from an editor of IGN Japan. Actually, to be accurate, it's the editor-in-chief of IGN Japan. There is no doubt that the Xbox Series X is aiming for a, quote, overwhelmingly higher performance than the PlayStation 5. PS5 wants to be cheaper than Xbox Series X because of the difference in specifications, end quote. So, a few caveats. One, I do not know the sources of this individual. I assume, because of their position in the industry, that they have pretty good sources, either from AAA studios or from Sony and Microsoft. The second thing is that this is not the first time that a journalist has said that the Xbox Series X seems to be ahead of the PlayStation 5. So, for example, just yesterday, a journalist over at Forbes believes that Sony seems a little bit worried, a little bit concerned about the Xbox Series X, and that's one of the reasons that they're waiting to announce the price of the PlayStation 5. However, some other journalists have said that both next-generation consoles are quite close to one another, which makes all of this kind of confusing. So, let's take a look at the underlying architecture of both systems. I've gone into this extensively several times in the past, so I'll link those videos in the description. But the gist is that both are using AMD-based technology with super-fast SSDs. When it comes to the APUs inside the consoles, which of course are the GPU-CPU combinations, they're both using Zen 2-based processors, 8 cores, 16 threads. The clock frequency for both of those consoles, though, is a little bit ambiguous. We've seen APU leaks for the PlayStation 5, and we're certain it's the PlayStation 5 APU. Well, let's just put it this way, pretty damn certain, because of the PCIDs for the APUs, and you can actually spot it kind of progressing and getting closer to final revision. So these were first discovered by Tim Apisak on Twitter, which were running PC benchmarks, because ultimately the APU is just a piece of hardware. It's really the software that works in collaboration with the hardware which makes the console, because ultimately the Xbox One, the PlayStation 4, the PlayStation 5 and so on really use custom variants of PC hardware. They're using x86 processors, AMD GPUs, and so on and so on. So what we saw with the Tim Apisak leak is a Zen 2 based CPU running at 3200 MHz with 8 cores, 16 threads. There are some reports that clock frequency has increased to 3500 MHz, which also Windows Central are reporting the Xbox Series X is running at. Furthermore, those same IDs, for example, Navi 10 Lite, which is associated with the PlayStation 5, we've seen in internal testing documents, which leaked from AMD and have a host of different APUs and silicon from AMD and Sony and Microsoft, although Microsoft's information is considerably less robust. I don't want to say too much about this because the individual who put the information out there did so by accident. Now, he's probably gotten in trouble, to be honest, but I also don't want to be the cause of him getting in further trouble, and that's one of the reasons I'm being kind of cagey about that, because I just, at the end of the day, I'm making videos for entertainment and fun. I don't want to kind of put anyone in the hot seat. But the long and short of it is that those internal testing documents backed up a lot of what we saw with APU, Navi 10 Lite, with configurations for backwards compatibility, which was 800 MHz at 18 compute units. That would be for the PS4 base model. The PS4 Pro was running at same number of compute units, 18, albeit at a higher clock frequency, 911. And then we had up to 2 GHz with 36 compute units. So basically, the GPU of the PlayStation, the GPU of the PlayStation has up to 40 compute units, but it looks like 4 of those are disabled. Kamachi, who is a very well-known leaker on Twitter, has spotted configurations up to 40, he confirmed to me, but late last year, As far as he knows, the PlayStation 5 is running with 36 of the 40 enabled. So he confirmed that to me. First of all, confirmed that there was up to 40 with, that was back in like August, I believe. He confirmed that to me in DM. And then just recently he confirmed that the new variant of the APU, which was Oberon B0, has up to 40 compute units and 36 are enabled for the PS5. Now, it's potentially possible more could be enabled. It would just mean worse yields. But Sony, in the final revision of the PlayStation 5, could run with 38 enabled if they were willing to have a lower number of dies, which would be usable. Because obviously, if their target is, just for the sake of argument, 36, and 38 dies are active and can work, that's great. If 38 are active and if 38 can work and they were targeting 38, that's great. But if 37 are usable, and they were targeting 38, they can't do that. They'll have to throw the die away, basically, and throw it into the scrap heap. But if they're targeting 36, that would work. I think that was a bit of an over-explanation. I think that was pretty obvious. But anyway. So the Xbox Series X seems to have a performance advantage. Digital Foundry have said it's got 12 versus 9. In terms of T-flops, Windows Central are reporting 12 versus 9. Forot seems to be reporting 12 versus 9. My sources have told me it's 52 or 56 compute units for the Xbox Series X. There are some disagreements with the number which is going to be active for the final console. Some people are telling me it's 60 for the dev kit with 56 for the final console. Others are telling me it's 56 for the dev kit and 52 for the final production console. So I'm not quite sure on that. That's why I'm giving you the range there to be as honest as possible, accurate as possible. So while the Xbox may have a performance advantage, and I would obviously give the asterisks of performance can change up until the last minute, although it would take an awful lot for Sony to redesign an APU. Interestingly, according to someone who emailed me recently, and I actually covered this in a video, exclusive, Oberon B0 has just come off the production line, and B0 basically fixes backwards compatibility stuff. That was one of the things, and also memory bandwidth. So we've actually seen from internal testing documents that the PS5 seems to have either 448 gigabytes per second of bandwidth or 512. Perhaps one of the reasons we're seeing this discrepancy is because Sony are trying to figure out how much bandwidth they need for the PS5. Now, I suppose people at this point are going to want to know how big of a problem is this going to be for the PS5. Well, honestly, I think the PS5 is going to be just fine. First of all, the PS5 is not going to be a turnip. It is going to be drastically faster than the PlayStation 4 Pro. It's going to stomp the Xbox One X for a multitude of reasons. One, the GPU is way more efficient. See one of my recent videos where I was going into the efficiency of RDNA, which is the generation of architecture used in the next generation consoles, versus what we have with the current generation consoles. So the PS5 is going to ruffle stomp the current generation in terms of the GPU. The CPU is going to be a tremendous advantage in terms of just what it can do. The world is going to be richer, it's going to be more vibrant, artificial intelligence is going to be better, there can be more characters on screen. It's just going to be a richer gaming experience. So the PlayStation 5 is not going to be a slouch. And honestly, Sony pricing the PlayStation 5 how they are kind of makes sense for them to price it cheaper than Microsoft, because ultimately, Sony wants to bring you into a console ecosystem, whereas Microsoft just wants you into their gaming ecosystem. So both of these companies are kind of approaching this slightly differently. With the xCloud, with Microsoft, they can really offer you a gaming experience from pretty much any device which has an active internet connection. So I think both of these companies are approaching it very differently. There's also the potential that we could see the next generation Xbox launched with a cheaper model, which is known as Lockhart or Xbox Series S. But honestly, I'm not convinced that this is ever going to launch because of, quite frankly, a lot of issues with development. It would just be a heck of a lot of work for developers to worry about creating another variant of game code. And we did see an APU, which some people are reporting was the Xbox Series S APU, but looking over it with the person who discovered it, Rogame, and I made a video about this as well, I just don't believe it. The fact that it's got no SMT support, it would just be a nightmare in terms of how games are created. Like, they expect a certain number of threads to be available, for example, and that doesn't make sense. The best guess I have is it's either an Xbox Series X APU, which is running with backwards compatibility, or it is an entirely different purpose-built APU, which could be for anything. It may not be even gaming related. So yeah, I would also say that one area that Microsoft have a lot to prove is also the games. And I think that people are a lot more willing to give the benefit of the doubt to Sony when it comes to their games lineup. And obviously, hardware advantage is great. But first of all, what games are going to be released to actually take advantage of it? And secondly, I wonder how much of a problem the pledge that Microsoft have had regarding supporting the original, well, not the original Xbox, but Xbox One with first-party titles which launch over the first couple of years is going to be. I wonder what impact that's going to have in how those games play, versus Sony, who are creating titles basically just for the PlayStation 5. So I'm going to be really interested to see how all of this comes together. I'd also like to spend just a moment thanking everyone who responded to my question regarding what people wanted for the next generation console. That is going to be an upcoming video for the next few days. And I'm also working on a video because a couple of people are asking me about the machine learning aspect of what Microsoft were discussing for the games that they're working on, which allows upsampling, I suppose, of low-resolution textures. So I'm going to be looking at that from a slightly different perspective over the next couple of days as well, and I'm putting the final plans together for a really big video featuring ray tracing, and that's been on the back burner for a while because honestly I was waiting to finish off an RX 5500 review, which I've now got finished, and so that's going to be up in the next couple of days, although that's not related to consoles at all. And also I was waiting for the delivery of a couple of graphics cards, which were the RTX 2060 Super and RTX 2070 Super, which allows me to explore ray tracing in a slightly different way than I was originally hoping. Anyway, somewhat related to the next generation consoles, I'd like to discuss another leak, and that pertains to Navi 10 Lite and 21 Lite. I am only going to spend a few moments discussing this because honestly, what this means is speculative at best, but Rogame on Twitter actually tagged me and let me know that Navi 21 Lite as well as 10 Lite were removed from the Mac OS 10.15.4 Beta 1. So we had actually seen entries in the AMD driver code. I'm simplifying things a little bit here, but we'd seen entries of those particular GPUs in the earlier beta, but it seems to be removed now. One guess I could levy at this is that it's potentially because these GPUs are specifically designed only around consoles. To my knowledge, Navi 10 Lite is specifically for the PlayStation 5, although it is not just based on the first generation RDNA. From what I understand, it does have some elements of the second generation. That's what I've been told anyway. And Navi 21 Lite is basically the Xbox Series X GPU. So I suspect one reason that this could be removed is because it's not a GPU which is intended for the Mac, basically. What we also know, of course, is the second generation of RDNA, Navi, is going to have several GPUs. It's going to have Navi 21, 22, and 23. So those GPUs and how they differ from their non-Lite counterparts is the subject of a lot of speculation at the moment. And honestly, I can't tell you anything for certain other than what I'm pretty sure of, that there's custom enhancements for the next generation consoles in there, but what all of those customizations actually are is ambiguous. And now, finishing off the video, I'd like to quickly discuss something concerning Intel's GPUs, or Intel Xe. Raja Koduri has actually shown a fresh wafer of Xe, but has basically provided no information on what this particular wafer is, so we don't really know anything regarding the performance advantage, the performance tier, of this particular card. Rather interestingly though, we also have some DG1 results, which would be for 3D Mark. Now, to be clear here, DG1 is a development kit, essentially. It basically has the purpose of allowing developers access to the Xe architecture. This is not a GPU which is intended for the public. It is a GPU which you can use in any system because it's a discrete GPU. So for example, you can have a Ryzen CPU and plonk this graphics card in, or you can have like a 7th or a 9th generation Intel CPU and use this GPU. So it's great for developers who perhaps just want a workstation that they can develop things on and test things on. So anyway, the fact of the matter is though, that the 3D Mark results were actually compared by Rogame against a variety of different APUs, and the bottom line is that the Xe GPU is faster. It's around 40-ish% faster than the Ryzen 7 4800U, although that is using a combination of graphics and physics tests. But when you factor in a combination of graphics and physics tests, AMD's chip is still faster. Now bear in mind, the 4000 series APUs are using the Vega architecture. They are not using the RDNA based architecture. Although what's quite interesting about the Ryzen 4000 series APUs is that the architecture inside them, Vega, has been optimized heavily. And this is something that I was discussing in another recent video, where basically I was stating that the second generation of RDNA has drastically improved efficiency compared to the first generation. And one example of this, before the second generation launches, is the Ryzen 4000 series APU. Anyway, I think that just about does it for this particular video, so hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you did, then the normal stuff. Like, share, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.